Hello, Maryam. Thank you for coming today. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about your photography project from last semester. So I wonder, could you just introduce yourself and the project to us?
Of course. My name is Maryam or Miriam. I go with both. I'm a junior IMC student at AUC, and I took a photography class with you last semester, and this was my final photography project. It's titled "When the Lights Went Out at My Home." It was a very personal project for me, and I feel like I really took my time with it because it was an individual project, so it was one of those things that I really wanted to perfect, kind of. And so I was going for kind of a nostalgic feel. And what inspired me the most was basically my childhood and the presence of my grandmother and my family and the strong familial bond. So I guess that was my starting point, and I just went off from there. Um, I chose my grandma's house as the main location to take my photos. And so, yeah, that was my inspiration.
And did you look at any other photographers' work, or how did you get the idea for something as original as this project?
I did do some research. I went on Lens Culture and I looked up a bunch of photographers, and it was more of a random search. What I did do is develop the idea of overlay. That's my starting point. And then I searched for like keywords on Lens Culture. So I would type in overlay in the search bar, and then some photographers' work would pop up, and it would kind of, I felt like other people had similar ideas, although I was pleased to find out that even though different people use the same technique, I felt like I integrated this idea of nostalgia and like this very personal experience into my photos. And so I did some research when it came to that. And coincidentally, at the same time, I was learning some graphic design on the side because I minored in digital media. And so I wanted to incorporate those two skills that I've learned, so photography and some graphic design, into the same project. So that was.
So you were interested in the idea of overlaying
Hmm.
two images together.
Yes.
And where did you get that idea? Where did that come to you?
Nothing like I'm sure I've seen this kind of technique around before, although I don't recall exactly a specific photographer who I derived my inspiration from. However, I did feel like this technique, I had like a mental image of what I wanted the photos to look like. And I tried very hard to kind of meet my own expectations. And so the idea of overlay, it was around, like I'm sure I've seen it before. Like when we walk around and we see different exhibitions, or we derive inspiration from these like different stimuli, and they're kind of buried into our, I don't know, like the back of our minds, and then we kind of match the two things together. I had an idea, and then I felt like, oh, this would be the perfect technique to implement this idea, and so that's how I thought of it. And I also felt like overlay would be the perfect technique to kind of parallel the idea of past and present together. And it would be the most effective way and also the most aesthetic way to, if that's, to deliver my idea or my message. So,
Yeah, that's an interesting word that you just used,
mhm.
aesthetic. Um, because that I think that's the thing that I really noticed about the images you made, and some of them are incredibly kind of haunting or something. There's something
Mhm.
very there's something actually like a performance in them, because I don't think it's simply that you overlaid two images together, because I think people do that a lot and they do it in different kinds of ways. And it's become a kind of internet meme as well in different styles. But I think what you did with it has a kind of, I don't know, some kind of feel, which I think is this aesthetic dimension, which is that it looks like um, it makes you feel something when you look at it. And I think, for instance, there's a photograph of you, I think in your grandmother's house, and that's obviously significant the grandmother is the kind of center of a
Mm-hmm.
family and a family history as well. But it's a photograph that I guess from looking at it visually without reading anything is you as a kind of blurred little girl,
Mm-hmm.
and then you kind of crouched down at the table looking into the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very, very striking image. And that's what I think, when I look at the work, is that makes it more makes it stand out from the usual, or the kind of ordinary idea. And I wonder if you could talk what, because I mean, personally, I've never done that, so I've never made a photograph with myself as a child and as an adult. So what was it like creating that kind of image, and how do you get the ideas of how to make
Mm-hmm.
these kinds of images?
So basically the first, it all came very natural. Like the first thing I thought of doing is going through old family albums and kind of, because at the end of the day, it's the process can be technical at times because I need to know, like I need to take the picture from a very specific angle. So when I do scan actual photos from family albums, I can properly overlay the photos on top of each other. And so the first thing I did was go through old family albums and kind of sometimes I would see a photo and I would feel like, oh, this would make a really good composition if I were to be in the photo and then put those two pictures together. So it was kind of a mental image I have of what I wanted the photo to look like, and then it was trial and error. Sometimes I would scan a photo from a family album and then take the actual picture and put them on top of each other. I would have like I would spend a good 5 hours at my grandma's house and keep taking photos of myself from different angles, and so I would have this big collection, and I would start piling them on top of each other like on Photoshop and see if they work or if they give off that feeling that I want them to give off. And so the specific one in my grandma's kitchen, because the kitchen is like a very central point to the familiar atmosphere and like my childhood in general, and I felt like the lighting was very nice at that specific moment, and I it made for a really for like a good composition in my head, and on application I felt like it worked. But the whole process was largely trial and error, and at the same time it was more of sophisticated guessing, or like I would have an idea, and given that I would take the photo at a very precise angle, I would put them on top of each other and see the results. And so that's how I went about it. Um, so that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think it's it's like the two photos do seem to really fuse together. They do. They seem. I mean, it almost looks like at times that there's a kind of ghost or something
Hmm.
moving. That you're kind of walking through somewhere, or you are somewhere where there's this kind of ghostly presence there. They look incredibly natural. They don't seem they don't seem like forced, or
Hmm.
they seem very, very natural. And I think that's actually part of how they work as well. And do you have any other photo projects that you're interested in, or is this sparked
It
anything?
has, yes, for sure. After I got that email from you, I thought, okay, maybe I can look more into photography, because it often happens that sometimes I do a class in something and then I get very hyped up, like at the during the semester, and then as we move on to the next semester I completely like forget about it. And in this case I feel like I want to experiment more with analog, with more analog photography. Like I we do own like many those cameras with film, and like old cameras that we used to own when I was a child, and I feel like I want to look more into analog photography. And I actually asked about film for my cameras, and in many Kodaks they said that they don't make that anymore. And like I feel like it's now a very niche kind of thing. It's for very specific people, and I feel like no, I would like to bring that back to life, but after careful, like I'd like to experiment and also research it and see how like the different techniques and what people do. And so, of course, I'd love to start because I never thought, I never really considered photography in the past, and now it seems like a very fulfilling thing to do. It's very cathartic sometimes.